a simpering, whimpering child again, bewitched.
Good afternoon from Castle Goring, from Nikki and from me. Today we are going to be speaking about the contents of Harry and Meghan's memoirs. And notice the way I put it. Not just Harry's memoirs, Harry's and Meghan's memoirs. Because my understanding is that Meghan has been directing traffic behind the scenes. Yet again, no surprise there. Yes, baby girl, I love you too, yes. So, without further ado, we will plunge right in after I take Mickey to the puppies. Say goodbye, Mickey. Well, so, where without Mickey? Sorry. You know, it is said that the royal family has been deeply concerned by Harry's decision to secretly collaborate with the Pulitzer Prize winning ghostwriter J.R. Moehringer on what his publishers describe as, quote unquote, the definitive account of the experiences, adventures, losses, and life lessons that helped shape him. I think there should be a to there somewhere, but it seems to have gone walkies, maybe by the PR people. Well, the royal family is right to be concerned. Moehringer has a gift for plucking at the heartstrings. He did it in the Andrew Agassi book, Open, and I will come to that a little later. But I think we need to examine him because he is the one who is going to be the creator, or I should say the sculptor, actually, of the book. Because Harry and Meghan are producing the clay, and he's going to give it form, and is giving it form. Those who think that the book is already completed, that's not how any efficient publisher would work. Sorry. They wait to the 99th hour to put the book to bed. They need a certain lead-in time, but if the book is important enough, they will crash the procedure so that it jumps the queue on other books. That's how publishers work with books they hope will be bestsellers. And they are hoping that Harry's book will be a bestseller. We need to focus initially on Moehringer. He's called Junior by everyone, but he uses the initials JR without full stops, incidentally. My information is that he is a stalwart of the 12-step program. He is one of the leading lights in the LAAA scenario. And this is really important because the book is conceived, being executed, the information being conveyed in terms of a 12-stepper. Now, to those of you who don't know what the 12-step programming is and what 12-steppers are, it is the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It bears some relation to St. Augustine's teachings. And I'm not going to go into the history of Al-Anon and AA. I leave it up to you to do your own research. Regrettably, I am very familiar with the 12-step program. I was a member of Al-Anon for several years as a result of marrying a drinking alcoholic. And I stayed in after I left him to cope with the devastation that he had wrought and his brother had wrought in my life. They were both drinking alcoholics, as indeed was their father and their mother. It turned out to be very useful because my mother was also an alcoholic and died of alcoholism. Not that I would ever have gone to Al-Anon for my mother, because I wouldn't have. There's some really important things that you need to be aware of when discussing AA and its members. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step program are absolutely wonderful. I can tell you, anybody who lives with a drinking alcoholic wants their loved one to go to AA. It's not enough to stop drinking, because if you stop drinking without going to AA, the effects of alcohol do not get treated. So you are what is called a dry drunk. So you are as if you were drunk, but you are not drinking. Also, if you go to AA and do the 12-step program, which it has to be said an awful lot of people don't do properly, some not at all. They use meetings as substitutes for alcohol. And it's a well-known fact that not everybody uses AA properly, that some people do, but some don't. But nobody is judgmental, because just staying off the booze is so important, especially to loved ones, that they're not too fussy. Also, in AA, an awful lot of people use AA as a free pass to indulge their underlying personality disorders. Many people drink or take drugs because they are self-medicating. They use alcohol and or drugs as a palliative to self-medicate themselves against their underlying personality disorder. My mother was somebody who did that. A lot of people, when they go to AA and stop drinking, they are confronted with the fact that they have seriously disordered personalities. So in AA, just to keep them off the sauce, they say, take what you like and leave the rest. There's no pressure on anybody in AA to do the 12-step program properly, as long as they adhere to the first step, which is that I am powerless over alcohol and my life has become unmanageable. As long as they avoid drinking, they get a huge free pass very often. and an awful lot of praise for just stopping drinking. So it actually is a narcissist and a sociopath and a psychopath and an antisocial personality type, or whatever the other underlying problem is, to indulge their awfulness. This is a very important point, because in my opinion, what we are seeing with the Harry situation is a version of this. The key to understanding the concept of the book and how the book is going to be executed is the 12-step program being used to make Harry's memories poignant, to give sympathy whether it should be due or not. Now, it is well known that many alcoholics and drug addicts are extremely manipulative people. That can be a good thing in certain circumstances and professions. They certainly know how to play upon the heartstrings, and nobody does it better than J.R. Moehringer. His career started with a real bang in 2000 when he won the Pulitzer Prize for his portrait published in the Los Angeles Times of the Gee's Bend, an isolated river community in Alabama where many descendants of the slaves now live, and how a proposed ferry to the mainland might change their way of life for the better. On the back of that, in 2005, he published a memoir of a bar run by his Uncle Charlie, which served as a sanctuary away from his chaotic family life. He was the son of a single mother, and it's a very moving book. It was made into a movie, released at the end of last year to a limited release. That should tell you something, meaning it's never gonna be a hit. It was produced by George Clooney, stars Ben Affleck as Uncle Charlie, and he's been nominated he was nominated for the Golden Globe Award and the Screen Actors Guild Award. The book and the movie are about, in part, the weight of family expectations, because J.R. Moehringer, in the book, his character, had a big issue because he wanted to be a writer and his mother wanted him to go to Yale or Harvard and become a lawyer. Now, when you are in AA or Al-Anon, there are a whole load of people speaking about how the weight of expectation upon them might have contributed to their drinking and or drug taking. The reality is, and I know this from my days as a member of Al-Anon, and I used to go to AA open meetings, and I spoke to many doctors who were expert in the field of alcoholism. Nobody knows what causes alcoholism and or drug addiction. In fact, in AA and Al-Anon, but usually AA open meetings, because the wives and husbands and children of alcoholics would sometimes cut them far more slack than the fellow alcoholics would cut them. Because we would make excuses and they wouldn't make any excuses at all. And one of the points that they made very firmly was that nobody knows what causes alcoholism. There seems to be a genetic predisposition to it. Now, Harry's family has had a lot of alcoholism in it. So alcoholism and indeed eating and personality disorders run in the Spencer family. They also run pretty strongly in the Boeslan family. I know some of the Boeslans. Alcoholism is rife in the Boeslan family. The royal family, some members of it also had a predisposition to drinking rather too much. But because they were quite disciplined and they had to perform public duties on a virtually daily basis, they would be functional drinkers who didn't start until fairly late in the day, but once they started, they didn't stop. And it has to be said, that's not true of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, because she used to be starting drinking at 11 o'clock in the morning. But she could hold her liquor. Well, nobody, as I say, knows what causes alcoholism. But a lot of people, when they give up drinking, they discover that they have feelings that they were anesthetizing. So when they're drinking, they are creators of havoc everywhere because they don't feel the pain they're inflicting on others. When they stop drinking, it becomes a different matter. And we're seeing this with Harry, because he is now completely focused on his feelings. And it's, in some respects, healthy to be in touch with your feelings, but in other respects, it's unhealthy to be so in touch with your feelings that you allow them to create irrational or destructive situations. All of this, by the way, is where the 12-step program comes in, because the 12-step program is very carefully calibrated to clean up the stinking thinking, and that's what it's called in AA, of alcoholics. They suffer from stinking thinking, and it is a way of cleansing their thinking, turning around their personalities so that even the underlying disorders can be dealt with, hopefully rather more efficiently than less efficiently. And of course, though, if somebody doesn't want to do anything about their personality disorders, nobody in AA is going to say to them, you have to do it. Because in AA, you're taught, don't take anybody else's inventory. So the only person whose inventory you should be taking is your own. Now, this should tell you something about Harry, because Harry and Meghan are busy taking everybody's inventory. So the basis of the book is a pity fest that poor Harry, he's suffered so much. His mother died, which is a genuine sadness, but he was a prince. And being a prince, he was so disadvantaged because he had to do certain things like the average working and middle class person doesn't have to do things on a daily basis that they may prefer not to do. And they'd like to sit down and contemplate their navel and talk about how much suffering they have endured, but they have to work. Not Harry. He doesn't have to work. We're going to get a pity fest of the strictures, the disciplines, the expectations, the burdens of being royal that had him in a straitjacket, as well as, of course, the happenings of life that had him in a straitjacket. And one thing you do notice in AA and Al-Anon is sometimes when people stop drinking and taking drugs, they're infinitely worse than when they were drinking and taking drugs. Or I should say, taking drugs. It's a well-known phenomenon that sometimes the personality that is revealed is so much more uptight, so much more pitiful, self-pitying, denigratory of everybody else, judgmental. That again is why the 12-step program is there. Well, we're going to hear in various ways, shapes and forms, because Mr. Moehringer is a genius at spinning a yarn. He ghosted Andre Agassi's memoir Open in 209. I'm going to give you a clue as to what's coming in Harry's memoirs, just off Andre Agassi's memoir. Drugs, personal confusion, troubled family relationships, suffering with parents that were not perfect, dishonesty with self and with others. Because one thing that's required in AA is to stand up and say, my name is X and I'm an alcoholic, and to lay claim to failings. The good ones lay claim to their true failings. The jerks, and there are plenty of them, take it from me, lay claim to fabricated failings that puff them up. Because if you have a narcissistic personality, once you give up drinking, you're not going to stop being a narcissist. You know, Moehringer is a rarely gifted author. In the New York Times, Janet Maslin said of Open, somebody on the memoir team has great gifts for heart-tugging drama. We're gonna get it in spades with Harry's memoir. We're gonna get the tragedies, the pain, the anguish, the wonderment of his mother saving the world and how he's on a journey to save the world. Because Harry displays attributes not only of narcissism, but of paranoia. Everybody's against me and I'm the most important person on earth. And I know so much better than everybody else that I can change the world into a better place. We're not only going to be treated to a pity fest of why Harry had to leave the strictures of that ghastly restrictive royal family into which he was born, and the way of life and all the things that they wanted him to do without being compensated on a direct commercial basis. So he had to flee to California to say he was going to be doing the same things that he was supposed to be doing in Britain, except he was going to do much fewer for much more money than anybody could ever get paid in Britain, and no royal ever gets paid for public service. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of self-justifying hypocrisy to explain away why Harry has given up the most secure and respected platform for public service on earth to hustle in California with what they call the A-list, but a lot of them aren't A-list, they're just superb hustlers. And in any event, since when the Ellen DeGenerateds of this world compare with a king, a queen, or a proper prince or princess? I mean, it's swapping a beautiful, well-cut diamond for cubic zirconia. I understand, under the guise of that Meghan saved him, he's going to take a whole load of swipes at everyone and the system that he is a product of, and that he and Meghan are trying to replicate for financial reward in the United States of America. But we're not allowed to monetize in Great Britain. You know, he's claimed that Meghan saved him because evidently in the book it says that when Harry and Meghan got together, Meghan realized that the relationship couldn't work as long as Harry was on the sauce, because Harry's behavior was so off the wall. But Meghan had already pressed his mummy button. Meghan had already got in there, playing Jocasta to Harry's Oedipus. She had a super powerful hold over him from the word go. Now, this is not going to be presented as anything disturbing. It's going to be presented as a great and true love. And that Meghan is the living embodiment of all of Diana's virtues. And that in fact, Meghan is the recreation of Diana in another form. and that Harry has been fortunate enough to meet and marry his mother in another form. What, in psychological terms, would be viewed as rather disturbing, and in AA terms would be viewed as rather sick codependency at best, is going to be presented as a great and true love. My wonderful wife has saved my life is going to be the theme. They should refer back to Dr. Max Glatt. Dr. Max Glatt was the person every spouse of an alcoholic, every child of an alcoholic wanted their loved one to go to. He died at 90 about 10 or 15 years ago. He was a brilliant man. He was one of the world's leading experts in alcoholism. He had a rule which I didn't know because I was desperate to get my husband into AA. And I was desperate to get a meeting with Max Glatt. Fortunately, my marriage unraveled before I was able to get the meeting, because it turns out that Max Glatt wouldn't actually take on as a client an alcoholic who stayed with the spouse he married when he was drinking, because his theory was, if you are attracted to somebody when you're drunk and they're attracted to you, they're not going to be a good team when you're sober. That's an interesting point to consider. Well, my understanding is Harry's going to be taking a whole load of swipes, many covert, many overt. Not only about his family and his background and the way he was brought up by his father, not by his mother. His mother's been deified. But his father and his stepmother can be prepared for, shall we say, a rocky ride. It will, of course, be done to an extent covertly, but it will be done. The royal way is a terrible way. You should never tell a child no is going to be basically the message. You should be like the way Meghan was brought up, always told yes, look at where that got her father. Bankruptcy and ice. And look at where it got her. From the opportunity to be the most revered and respected member of a royal family on earth to a figure of revilement and rebuke in less than 2 years. My understanding is that Harry has spoken to various people, including Julia Samuel. Now, Julia Samuel is a very interesting person. She is Sabrina Guinness's sister. I don't really know her. Sabrina and I used to go to parties together when we were all young, but I haven't seen Sabrina for years either. She was really lovely, by the way. And she had a little step out with Prince Charles. And Julia became a great friend of Diana's. She is also a psychotherapist and a pediatric counsellor. I think her specialty is grief, if I remember correctly. She's a very decent person. She's Prince George's godmother. And I will be very interested to see if her positive contributions will be able to be spun into tentacles. Well, Meghan, to an extent, you could say, did save Harry because she's the one who got him off the sauce. My understanding is that he was not an all-day, everyday alcoholic. He was what used to be called, I don't know if it's still called, a periodic alcoholic. When he started drinking once or twice a week, he couldn't stop and wouldn't stop. And he would let's put it this way, it wasn't a pretty sight. And I know what I'm talking about because he actually attacked a friend of mine in public, unprovoked on one occasion. And he had to be pulled off by his security detail. Well, Harry had sought and got treatment for his patent personality and behavioral problems and psychological and emotional problems before he sought help for his drinking problem. And it also has to be said that we all know that Meghan, at her first wedding, distributed joints to all of the guests. And one of them was absolutely furious because she took back the gift bag to America and didn't realize that there was grass in it. I think there was a spliff or two or three. I don't remember how many now. It's in my book. But Meghan realized that she couldn't manage Harry as long as he was on the sauce, and that her ambitions with regard to Harry would never be realized because he was rendered unmanageable by alcohol. And she talked him in to seeking help for his, let's call it what it is, alcoholism. Because you don't need the 12-step program if you're not an alcoholic. Catherine and William had convinced him to have therapy before, but there's no point in an alcoholic having therapy as long as he's drinking. He has to stop drinking, otherwise the therapy is rendered pointless. That's one of the cornerstones of AA. I'm going to tell you what the 12 steps are, and I'm going to show you how wildly Harry is ignoring some of them. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Well, that's one that he admitted and has adhered to. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, the presentation is going to be that he has discovered that, but the reality is the power that is greater than himself is Meghan, and she is the one who has restored him in his mind to sanity, but in everybody else's opinion who knows him, to anything but sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. I think it's safe in this instance to say that God is a woman called Meghan. It is obvious that neither Harry nor Meghan has 1 ounce of spirituality between the two of them. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't want a deity figure. And who better than Jocasta when you are Oedipus Rex? 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Well, he made a fearless and searching inventory of everybody else and has been able to point a finger at why everybody let him down, and none of it was his fault. It was everybody else's fault, and Daddy didn't give me any money. And when I was 5 years old, I was told by Granny to sit down and stop creating havoc, and I'm still traumatized. And Meg's baby has shown me. She's shown me how she would have been traumatized if she'd ever been told no. And when she was discovered as an adult that not everybody worshipped at her altar, which they should, that was a great trauma. So she'd take to bed for days with bottles of alcohol and drink herself into oblivion, crying because she wasn't getting what she wanted. Do we get a whiff of spoilt bratism here? And talk about perverting the proper path for 12-stepping. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Well, we can safely say that Harry hasn't reached the 5th step yet, because he does nothing wrong, nor does she. If they were practicing that 5th step, they would know that they are not in a position to set themselves up as Petronius arbiter and preach to everybody about any hobby horse that runs past their yard and that they nab and jump on and ride off into the sunset, saving the world yet again. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Well, there's no way, because neither Meghan nor Harry has a defect in their character. And it would be an impertinence to expect God to do anything but admire his handiwork of perfection. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Those two puffed of pomposities, they have no shortcomings. I don't think they've even ever read the 7th step. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed, and became willing to make amends to them. Well, that's a real goodie, let me tell you. And that's something that everybody in AA is encouraged to do. Well, Harry and Meghan haven't harmed anybody. They didn't help to make Prince Philip's death far more trying and the grief of the rest of the family far more onerous than it had to be, did they? They haven't harmed anybody, so they don't need to make amends to anybody because they're the victims. And this is where, in AA, the danger of take what you like and leave the rest comes in. Because those who do not practice the 12-step program develop tools for further havoc, manipulation, and abusiveness. I've seen it with my own two eyes, as has everybody else who's ever graced the doorstep of an Al-Anon or Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Again, perfection doesn't need to make amends to people. And are they making amends? Is he making amends? Has he apologized to the British people? Has he apologized to the army? Has he apologized to his grandmother? Has he apologized to his father? Has he apologized to his brother? Has he apologized to his sister-in-law? Who was seriously injured by his conduct. 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Well, I'm sure because J.R. Moehringer is very familiar with the 12-step program and knows how to spin it to his and everybody else's advantage, many of these issues will be resolved before the book is published. However, Harry and Meghan taking personal inventory, that means you look at when you're wrong and admit it. They're never wrong. Everybody else is wrong. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Well, as I said earlier, where Harry's concerned, God is a she, and she is called Meghan. But he is a very rebellious subject. He doesn't always worship at her altar. But he understands that she is the goddess. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Well, there has been no spiritual awakening as a result of these steps or anything else. They've certainly not carried this message to alcoholics and practiced these principles in any of their affairs. Not what I have been told, and not what I can see of their performance. Because pontificating is not the same as a spiritual awakening. Well, Now that Harry has given up Sorry, I'm sniffling. Oh, he's given up drinking. Sorry, I've got the sniffles. I still have a cold. Now that Harry has given up drinking, gosh, I'm really getting the sniffles. Sorry. But it's very funny, although I'm getting the sniffles, my nose is as dry as anything. Very odd cold that I have at the moment. It's been lingering too long. Harry is clean of alcohol, but he's a shining light who should be followed by all as an example of goodness and all the other qualities that delusional, narcissistic, spoiled, entitled, overprivileged paranoics possess. We are going to be treated to how wonderful Harry is, how much he's suffered, far more than any of those people in South Africa that they just acted as if their suffering didn't count because their suffering was so much greater. We are supposed to take Meghan and Harry at their estimate of themselves. And it is going to be spun in the most wonderful way by Mr. Moehringer. And the false premise that Harry's suffering has been so acute and that it was brought on by external circumstances, as they exaggerate their pain, as they exaggerate their contributions, as they exaggerate everything. It's going to be plucking at our heartstrings. There's going to be a massive failure to take responsibility for himself or his fate. Of course, they're going to say that he's taken responsibility. There's going to be the genetic pain, not the generational pain, the genetic pain. There's going to be blaming the royal way of life for his problems. And he's going to evidently manage to put the boot in with Camilla, notwithstanding the fact that, contrary to popular opinion, Camilla did not destroy the Wales marriage. She actually saved Charles at a time when he was beyond low, because Diana was not the only person who suffered as a result of the failure of that marriage. He did as well. Let us see what happens, because there's going to be a lot of candy coating, I understand, of the Diana matter and of Diana's problems, because Harry didn't really know his mother. I mean, it's sad, but he'll tell you he basically doesn't remember that much about his mother, which is really sad. But Moehringer is going to find a way of explaining away all Harry's failings and turn them into virtues. let us see the reaction when the book comes out, because Moehringer is a brilliant writer. He has not only the skill of a good writer, and he not only understands about alcoholism and all the problems that go along with it, and being from a troubled background, but he is a genius, evidently, at spinning so that failings become virtues and knives get plunged in. Not always fairly, but very effectively. And if anybody wants to know anything more specific than what I have said, please feel free to ask the questions in the comments section. Thank you very much. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and remember, keep those questions coming in. Thanks and goodbye.